Time now for the Geek Show, today with Ms. Behaviour joining us from the Mohawk Studios in Wellington City. Good morning, Ms. B.
Good morning, Wammo.
Good morning. And a crazy old story this week is broken in Mexico, saying that a school teacher and radio presenter have been accused of spreading false reports that gunmen were attacking schools. They did this on Twitter, and now they could be facing jail time. So today we're talking about perhaps thinking before you tweet, Ms. B.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite a big story in the Twitterverse. And, you know, it's really important to realise that governments and police and agencies are looking very seriously now at what social media around breaking events. So what happened was in Mexico, there was an alleged incident of a gunman at a school kidnapping children, which turned out to be false reports, which was spread by a couple of people. And they're now facing up to 30 years in prison for what's being called Twitter terrorism.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, so it's very important to realise that when you're when you're using Twitter, that you have to really think about the fact that you're using a public medium for using your voice, and there are lots more. There's so many incidents happening now that it's really important to check the veracity of stuff before you tweet it. Otherwise, you might find that it comes back and causes you some prison time.
Yeah, well, wasn't there the case in England, I think it was a couple of years ago now, a part-time sort of journalist, he tweeted something about, he was frustrated at an airport and the fact that, I guess flights were delayed or something, and he sort of said, I want to blow you up, or something along those lines. And he was arrested, and his house was searched, and he ended up going through the court process. And I can't remember exactly what happened at the end of the day, but it really ruined his life for a while.
That's right. So you can see that the authorities are taking this very, very seriously. And I think people, when they're in social media, they kind of treat it like a conversation between friends, when in fact it's a very, very public forum. You've also got the case with the couple of guys in Britain who've just been jailed for 4 years, I believe, for inciting people to riot on Facebook. Even though they deleted the Facebook groups and the only people who turned up was them and the police, it's still, they still took it very, very seriously. So right now you've got people like Hugo Chavez coming out and saying, this is really serious. We have to punish these people. So obviously what they did, and it caused a huge amount of problems. I think, parents were panicking. They were leaving their cars in the street and just running to try and get their children from schools. And I've heard reports of up to 26 car accidents because of this.
Wow. This also happened on a lower level here in New Zealand. I think out in South Auckland, a prominent, a musician tweeted something about a possible gunman, and they were evacuating a street, but the police had to come out half an hour later and say, no, this isn't actually the case, there's something else going on. But he managed to cause a little bit of panic. So I guess this happens, though, a lot of the times with the best of intentions.
Well, that's right. I mean, these two people who've basically been, put in jail for this or facing jail for this, they're claiming that they only repeated what they saw elsewhere on the internet. But obviously that's not good enough. So I think the thing to realise is when you're on Twitter, you have to start to take it a bit more seriously as a publishing medium. And be very, very careful about checking your stories, almost like having to be a journalist.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. I mean, I do wonder sometimes how War of the Worlds would go down today, because that was a famous case back in 1938 of Orson Welles, who did a radio play adaptation of H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds. And it was broadcast as if it was a real series of news broadcasts. And it did cause some panic. However, when you read, and it's often cited as causing mass panic and hysteria, but the interesting thing is when you read around the story, the reports of the panic that he caused seemed to have been slightly embellished by the print media because they weren't very happy about this new fangled broadcasting technology of radio coming along.
Right.
So you can draw quite a nice parallel today between the way that old media and politicians especially are viewing new media and social media specifically. You can look at, David Cameron in the UK threatening to, shut down Twitter if there are any cases of more, riots in the streets. But it's really easy to focus on the negative side. But I think it's very, very important to take responsibility when you are tweeting, to be really careful about passing on reports that if you're not sure, 100% sure that they're right, then just don't tweet.
Yeah, but sometimes I guess sometimes the traditional media is guilty of taking some of what's going on in so-called new media or Twitter or or Facebook and republishing it themselves without doing the normal journalistic practices of fact-checking as well. So, one thing seems to feed the other.
Definitely. And that's the other thing to realise is that if you tweet, you are doing this in a public forum. And there was a case in the UK recently with the Press Complaints Commission. Somebody tweeted I think she was tweeting on her private feed, but she mentioned something about work. So it was a Department of Transport official on her private feed, even though it was very, very clearly marked that it was her private feed and none of the things she said should be deemed as being from her work. She made a complaint because a newspaper published her tweets in a story around this. And the Press Complaints Commission has ruled in the UK that information posted on Twitter should be considered public and publishable, despite the claim that the information is private and was only meant to be seen by the user's followers. Because, of course, anybody can see it, whether you're following them or not, unless you keep your tweets private, which kind of, is the opposite of the way to use the medium. So the Press Complaints Commission ruled that the publicly accessible nature of the information was a key consideration, and the fact that the press reprinted these tweets was not an unjustifiable intrusion into her privacy, even though she had a very clear disclaimer on her feed to say these are my views, not the views of my work. So,
that brings up another issue, though, doesn't it? Often, of course, businesses will have their official Twitter accounts, but then often all the employees will have their own individual personal accounts, and you'll often see that on their profiles. It says, "This is my views and not the views of my employer." Is that enough of a caveat to put on your Twitter feed? Does that, should that mean that in fact, that or everything that is said in that Twitter feed should not relate at all to work? I mean, how should people respond to that?
Well, it seems to be that putting a caveat on isn't enough, and you do need to basically be really, really careful about anything that could potentially be tied to your work. It's also really important that companies have very, very clear policies about use of Twitter. I don't agree with banning it outright. I think, trying to ban this really powerful tool that connects people together and enables people to have conversations on the fly and get information and get together for really good reasons, not just for riots, but Twitter was used after the London incidents for people to come together and clean up the streets as a community. Yeah. So it's an amazing power for good. But I think the key thing is that it's important to very much separate your work and your personal tweets, and just don't use your personal channel for any kind of opinionated statements that could potentially be tied into your profession. Yeah. You've just got to be very, very careful. So I think the rule of thumb that I say to people is, before you tweet, think, would I say this in a public environment? Would I go into a crowded room and yell this out loud? And if not, then maybe you should have a think about whether or not you should say it online, because anything on the internet that you publish is there forever. And and the last thing you want to see is your quotes appearing in a news article.
Yeah, but sometimes I do feel like walking into a crowded room and yelling, "Damn you all to hell," or something.
I know, it wouldn't be fun. But yeah, so I think that's the key thing, is it's a public forum. It enables you to have a public voice, but with that opportunity does come a lot of responsibilities. And I think it's just important for people to realise that they need to be a little bit careful and just, like I said, just think very carefully before you post your 140 characters of opinion.
Hey, before we wrap, let's talk about Mix and Mash.
Yes, quick shout out. Now, this is a great competition that's running. I'm lucky enough to be one of the judges. It's run by Digital New Zealand. And if you are involved, if you're a project team and you are creating a remix or a mashup as part of the competition, which is running for another couple of weeks, you could win an elephant.
Hey!
Yeah, win an elephant. I mean, how cool is it? You don't have to put the elephant in your backyard, by the way. They'll keep it at the zoo for you.
Yeah.
But all you have to do is tweet at Mix and Mash NZ and tell them today before 3 o'clock what you're working on, and you'll go into a spot prize, one of which is to win an adopted animal of your choice from an NZ zoo or a wildlife centre. So whether you like lions, tigers, elephants, give it a go.
Does that mean you get exclusive access?
I'm not sure what the deal is. I think the adoption deal will probably allow you to meet your animal.
Yeah.
But you don't have to look after your animal or basically deal with them. So yeah, just tweet today at Mix and Mash NZ what you're working on. You'll go into the competition, and if you want to find out more about the competition, which is still going for another couple of weeks, so you've still got time, then just go to mixandmash.org.nz.
Wonderful. And of course, if you want to see this as a video once more, you can up at thegeekshow.com, 2 3s rather than 2 E's, and you can tweet Misbehaviour as well, twitter.com/Misbehaviour. See ya next time. See ya.